Hello, everyone. I hope we all had a wonderful Christmas break and that you got all the things that you wanted and spent time with your family and loved ones and had a good time. Um, it's currently Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, it's New Year's Eve. um, and I can't do anything, so we're gonna rank all of the books and comics that I read this year. So let's let's get started. And we're going to start with iZombie. Now, iZombie was a bit of an interesting comic book. I started off really loving it, and as you know from my review, it takes a very quick twist and turn. So if I was just rating the first three chapters, I would give it maybe an A or a B, but because it's of the way it ended and how how much it jumped the shark. Unfortunately, iZombie is going to end up in the C list from me. So that's a C for iZombie. Next up is Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames. I read this at the beginning of the year when I was recovering from surgery and through my hospital stay. Technically, I started it in 2020. This is the sequel to Kings of the Wild, and while the tone is very similar and there are some great moments in this book, I feel like it failed to deliver the expectations I had based on the first book. It is a worthy sequel, but it suffers from all the normal things you expect sequels to suffer from. Also, they did my boy Gabriel dirty in this, so yeah, I'm gonna have to give this one. This one was a solid B, a good sequel, not as good as the original, but still worth a read. I would recommend you read it if you enjoyed the original one. Form your own opinion. B. Next up is Breach of Peace by Daniel B. Green, a relatively popular booktuber over on this YouTube platform. This is Daniel's debut novel, or novella, I should say, and I have to respect the fact that he went in with a novella and he's sort of working on honing his craft before he goes and tries to, put out a full size novel. And he definitely needs to, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. I think he's doing the right thing here. I enjoyed this for what it was. It has a lot of the sort of jitters you would expect from a first time work, and a few more runs or maybe a second beta reading team to sort of pick up on some things that the first team maybe didn't, would have done this in wonders. But there is a great premise and idea here, and Daniel B. Green definitely has a future as a writer. Especially if he continues to practice and improve from this one. I'm very excited to see what he has to do in the future, and for that reason, this is also getting a B right next to Bloody Rose, so nothing to be ashamed of. Ooh, next up we have Fatale, or Fatal, or it's Fatale, Femme Fatale. Fatale is a part noir period piece, femme fatale based detective story, part Lovecraftian horror story. It's a very interesting mix, and it's made by one of my favorite modern comic book teams of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, who also did Velvet, a phenomenal series, and I'm currently reading their criminal series now. I do intend on doing a full review of this series soon, so I won't say too much here, but definitely one worth checking out. It's not my normal flavor of tea, so this one's getting a solid A, which is a huge praise for me because this is not my normal thing, but I enjoyed it a lot. Good comic book. And sticking with the comic books, we have Possessive. I love this book. I love her. This book is so good. If you haven't seen my review for this one, definitely check it out. Possessive is a story about Todd, a loser who's down on his luck. And everything changes when he buys a mansion which is haunted by my one and only waifu for Laifu and after. And I love this book. If you want to know my full thoughts on it, check out my review of it. I'll leave a little thing for it here. However, this is a tier. It was funny. It was well written. The art was great. It was heart tugging. The only thing I dislike about it is the ending. But everything else about it was great. So Possessive is an A. Really enjoyed it. Highly recommend. Oh God. Next up is Robert Crone's The Low End Kid, which is supposed to be a cyberpunk story about this like young Harrison Ford-esque character whose name I've already forgotten, just like this book should be forgotten. It's we group read this in the loin stream, and even that was challenging. Like by the time we finished that, I was tired. I just I wanted to end everything. It's such a bad book. Don't bother with it, please. Robert Crone, if you're out there listening, this ain't it, fam. This ain't it. Oh, it's getting an F, by the way, if you can't tell. And now for an actual cyberpunk novel. Meldoms Golem was such a fantastic read. If you're interested in starting out with cyberpunk, this is one of those novels that you should definitely consider starting with. Mel Odom's ability to turn a android, sorry, he's a bioroid, into a character that you actually feel for and understand is incredible. This was such a fun story, and I cannot wait to read the sequels, which I will definitely be doing in 2022. Mel Odom's Golem gets an S. And now onto probably the most mainstream book in this series, in terms of the novels, but Brandon Sanderson's Rhythm of War. Um, I've read all the Stormlight Archive books, and this is, I believe, the fifth one in it, and sadly, it was the hardest one to read. I had a lot of trouble getting through some of the chapters, specifically in the second half. Um, the opening of the book's great, but some of the characters you've just spent four very long novels sort of, developing and falling in love with take the backbench for this book to introduce some much needed sort of world building on the new characters. However, a lot of that world building we already had the answers to from the previous books. This is just reiterating it from a different perspective, and it was a chore for me to read. It actually took me about 9 months to get through this because I kept putting it down at certain chapters because I just knew I didn't want to go ahead and read them. And for that reason, Rhythm of War is getting a C. I didn't expect that because this franchise is great, but this is the weakest in the franchise, and I know Sanderson can do better. Next up, we have Empress Teresa, which we read as a group read in the loin stream, and all I have to say about this one is this is what you get when you're too afraid to tell someone that maybe their dreams need to be shifted a little bit. This gets an E. From one train wreck to another, we have New Tokyo by Mark Fox. Probably not a furry, but you'd have to ask him. This book is the Low End Kid 2.0, and it suffers all the same problems as the Low End Kid, except no, it's basically the same book, and it was a chore to get through. It was a group read on the loin stream, which makes things better. Had this been a personal read of mine, I wouldn't have finished it. It's incredibly boring with a nonsensical story. If you want to know more, go check out Ian Kirkpatrick's review. She does a really great, thorough review of this, and I agree with her 100%. It's just not a good book. Next up is Sonic City Witch by Trisha Scafari. This is an indie comic book, and Trisha's surname is a YouTuber by the name of Dan Fan. This is the art in this book is incredible. I wish the whole thing was in color, but there's kind of charm to it not being in color. It's a somewhat unique story, and it's a bit of a fun read. It's it is an indie comic book. I enjoyed it. I'm going to give it a C. It's not bad. It just has a lot to grow. I did review it though, so you can check out my review of that. and maybe buy it for yourself. It's not very expensive, and see what you think. Next up is James Bond's Casino Royale, based on the novel, not the movie. I really enjoyed this book. The art was great. It was an interesting take, being able to see the thoughts of Bond as a character and really dive into what makes Bond Bond. Highly recommended. This gets an A on my list as well. A very good book, and I do intend on reading the rest of the James Bond comics to see how they stack up. I know a lot of people out there like this book, especially on Minds. This is Why Not Wichita by Peter Catania, a interesting sort of superhero-esque comic about a girl who is tasked with keeping her city safe from giant monsters and kaiju, etc. But she just wants to take a holiday, and the powers that be will not let her. It's a very juvenile comedy, and the humor personally didn't work for me. It's very Family Guy esque, and it's strange because I've interacted with the author a few times, Peter Catania, and he's a hilarious person and a really nice guy. Um, and I just wish he used more of his everyday humor in this book and less of the sort of toilet humor style jokes. But I'm in the minority here. A lot of people love this book. It's just a type of humor that I've grown out of. Um, Why Not Wichita is a C for me, but if you're into those sort of things and that sort of humor, it's probably an A for you. Next up, a franchise I probably will never grow out of, we have the Rugrats comics. Um, I did recently review these, so check that review out. But this series started off S tier. It was everything I wanted out of a Rugrats comic, and it was very clever. And then, as you've probably seen in my review, or hopefully you've seen in my review, it very quickly barrel rolls into something so strange and bizarre that I can only recommend you pick up the first three, maybe four issues and the final issue, but skip the middle period in this one. The Rugrats comic, for that reason, goes from an S to a D. Next up is Aliens Earth War, which is the spiritual sequel to Alien 2, I believe, or Aliens. Um, Unfortunately, a myriad of bad art decisions and a very boring story. It's just sort of like the events in this comic book are essentially the same events we've already seen in the movies. Really stopped this one from shining. And the Aliens universe and series of comics is so large that there was so much they could have done with this one, and I feel like it was a bit of a cop out. And for that reason, Aliens Earth War is also getting a D. It's no secret that I'm a massive fan of James Cameron's Avatar. I'm not ashamed to admit that. However, Avatar The Next Shadow was the laziest attempt at adapting what is a very in-depth and expansive sci-fi world, and such a missed opportunity for the creator that I cannot recommend it to anyone but the absolute die-hard Avatar fans. Let's hope the movie coming out this year is better. There's no doubt in my mind that The Cyborg Tinkerer by Meg Latour is an absolute train wreck of a novel. However, it holds a very special place in my heart as it created the Loinstream community that I am so fond of. What it lacks for in grace and beauty, it makes up for in a very poorly batch of fried eggs in the morning. And for that reason, The Cyborg Tinkerer is actually getting an S. I'm kidding, it's getting an A, but it is awful. I don't recommend it to anyone. It just holds a very sentimental and special place in my heart. So there we have it. That was my 2021 in books and comic books. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you want to buy these books? I'll try and put as many links as I can below as to where you can get them. Um, Thank you so much for watching, and let's hope 2022 brings more joy and fun and happiness for everyone. Thank you again.